Hello, Larry.
Hi, Brad.
How are you?
I'm good.
Well, we're here today, October 29th, 2023. We're here today to do a video for your children, your grandchildren, and your future descendants as a present for them to get to know you, know about your life and who you are and what's important to you. And Max Hortick, who's doing the videography, and myself, Brad Feldman, are privileged to be here to do this with you and to provide you the opportunity to give an enduring present to your family. So I'm going to be asking you a series of questions, some fun, some serious, and there are no wrong answers because you're the keeper of all the answers, and however you'd like to answer these questions is up to you. So I'm going to start really simple and ask you your full English name.
Lawrence, spelled with a U, not a W.
Okay.
Alan, A-L-A-N, Miller.
And what is your Hebrew name?
My Hebrew name is Zalman Avram Miller.
And who were you named after?
I was named after my great-grandmother, Zlata Kanfer Rosenstein. She was born in 1846 in Odessa, Russia. She died in Detroit, October 19th, 1944. She was 98 years old, and she's the oldest person buried in the Brit Sholem Cemetery in Roseville, Michigan.
Wow. And what day were you born?
December 1st, 1948.
I draw some import to the fact that you were born in the same year that the state of Israel was born.
That is correct.
And in a short while, I'm going to be asking you some questions about current issues with Israel and some of your thoughts on them. But for now, when you were born, where did your parents live?
We lived at 18507 Burwood, which is in the 7-mile Wyoming, Myers, Curtis neighborhood of Detroit.
In Detroit. And how long did you live in that home?
From 1948, when I was born, till 1960, when we moved to Oak Park.
And did you have siblings?
I have twin sisters, Susie and Margie, born March 2nd, 1951.
And are Susie and Margie still alive?
They sure are.
And are you close with them?
My best friends. Susie was my office manager for 37 years.
And what kind of office?
Dental. I'm a dentist.
And we'll talk about that
Talk
in a
about
little
that
while.
later, okay?
When you moved, you were about 12 years old.
Yes.
And do you recall that being exciting, difficult when you moved to the new home?
I don't remember it being difficult. I remember it being exciting because we moved from a little tiny 800 square foot house in Detroit to a 4-bedroom house with 2.5 bathrooms in Oak Park in a nice little subdivision called Palmer Woods Manor off of 10 Mile in Scotia. And it seemed like a mansion. I mean, it was about 2,200 square feet, but from 800 square feet, it was really almost like a mansion. And it was the nicest neighborhood. And I can only say that it was just a great move, and I loved growing up as a teenager in Oak Park.
Did you leave any close friends behind in Detroit when you moved?
Yes, I did. But around that time, many of them also moved too. Some moved to Southfield, some moved to Birmingham, some moved to Huntington Woods. It was sort of a time when there was a Jewish migration out of Detroit.
What were your parents' names?
Peggy and Harry Miller.
When were they born?
My mother was born November 22nd, 1922. My father was born May 19th, 1916, both of them in Detroit.
Did you have a lot of family living around you in Detroit?
A lot of family. A lot of family. My father had 4 siblings. My mother had 2. I had probably close to 15 first cousins. My parents were the youngest of their siblings, so most of my cousins were older than me. But our life was really revolved around our family and our extended family.
How so? Did you guys...
Holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, especially Passover. The Seders were amazing. The Seders were at my grandparents' house. I use my hands a lot. The Seders were at my grandparents' house, and we would have tables with, like 20, 30 people at the Seder, and my grandfathers were the patriarchs, and they ran the show. Even as little kids, we couldn't talk. We just had to sit, and used to visit my mother's parents, the Dermers, that's my mother's maiden name, every Friday night, and every Sunday afternoon we were with the Millers, grandparents.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father started off after World War II when he came back from serving in the Pacific. He went into the deli business with his brothers, Miller's Deli, and in about 1951, one of my father's brothers was in the roofing and siding business, and my father decided, after my mother telling him that she didn't like all the late hours and blah blah blah, and so he went in the roofing business, and he named it after the street we lived on, Burwood. It was called Burwood Roofing Company, and he was in that business until he retired in the late 80s. And my mother was a housewife, which is what most of our mothers were in those days, back in the 50s, and she was a housewife.
Did you ever go to work with your father?
All the time. I would go to work with my father on the weekends. I would go to work for my father sometimes in the summers. And I hated it. I used to climb ladders holding buckets of hot tar. He had a tar kettle behind his station wagon, and with hot tar, and we would put the hot tar in a bucket, and I would climb up a 2 or 3 story, like ladder to take the hot tar and mop the roofs. And it was during that time that I decided that I would become the first male in my family to go to college, which I did do, and that I was not going to be in the roofing business. Most of my cousins went in the roofing business. My father and his 2 brothers were in different businesses, but all roofing, and all their kids went in the roofing business, but not me.
Despite that, I imagine you had a close relationship with your father.
It was great. The first thing, my father was one of the first persons that had an early telephone. It wasn't really a telephone in his car, but I remember the number was 345. He would have a little, almost like a handheld, and he would press the button and say, car 345, and this place on James Cousins called Almar would answer the phone, and he would say, please call, like number so-and-so, and that would be my father's brother. And the first thing, when I worked for him on Saturdays, the first thing they would do about 10 o'clock in the morning is decide where we would meet for lunch. And we always went to these really cool places for lunch on whatever side of the town, whether it was the east side, the south, west side of Detroit or whatever. And I had a ball with my father. My father was a character. All my father did was drive around, and he had the worst sense of direction, and we would always get lost. And he was just fun. He was a great guy, and yeah, I was very close with both my parents and my sisters.
What are 1 or 2 things that you can recall that were like positive influences your father had on you in your life?
He wanted me to have an education. My father went to Northern High School, never graduated, left high school in the 11th grade and went to work for his parents, my grandparents, in the little deli store that they had. And he wanted me to have an education. And like I said a minute ago, I was the first male in my family to go to college. I went to Wayne State University. And but my father he was a really hard worker. My father would get up at 6 in the morning. It was not an easy job being a roofer, climbing ladders, and he did all the manual labor. He had people working with him, but he did the manual labor. And he had a work ethic that he taught me. And one of the most important things that I can say about my father is he was nice to everybody. And that was something that between him and my mother, I had two of the greatest parents that they left with me.
So the next question, of course, is your mother. How was your relationship with your mother?
So my mother was everybody's friend. My mother was cool. My house was the house in Oak Park that everybody would come to. Friday nights, open house at the Millers, open house at the Millers. My parents didn't care. They could be all over the house, in the backyard, whatever. They loved having all my friends over. And everybody loved my mother. My mother's name was Peggy, as I said before. And my mother was an entertainer. During World War II, she sang and danced for the local USO. And she used to dance and sing in charity events. She opened the Hadassah luncheons every year, singing the Star Spangled Banner. She was incredibly outgoing. She was very pretty. And my parents had a great social life. And they both taught me the importance of family. And to this day, there's nothing more important to me than my family.
Since I know a little bit about you and your daughter and your granddaughter, how dance has been part of your life and taking dance lessons, now I kind of understand that it came from your mother, I would assume, and
yes,
that influence there.
My father couldn't dance, but he did learn from my mother. I'm going to tell you how this started. In the early 1940s, my mother's father, Harry Dermer, D-E-R-M-E-R, was in the restaurant business here in Detroit. And I don't know how this happened, but he ended up buying a small hotel, an inn, in a little town called Greenbush, Michigan. When I say little, it didn't even have the word village limit or anything. It just said if you were driving on US 23, reduce speed, meaning you had to slow down because you were in this little tiny place. It was north of Oscoda, it was south of Alpena on US 23, right on Lake Huron. He bought this inn that had been built in the early 1920s, and he changed the name to the Greenbush Inn. He and my Uncle Mort, my mother's brother, made some additions and renovations to the inn. It was only open from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And if you think about the movie Dirty Dancing, Greenbush Inn was like Dirty Dancing, and I remember it even as a little boy. They had a 9-hole golf course, they had riding stables, they had one of the first large outdoor pools built. They even built a tunnel that went under US 23, which was just a 2-lane road, so the guests could go from the hotel to the beach without crossing this 2-lane road where all the cars were driving on. And they had a live orchestra in the ballroom. My grandfather did most of the cooking. And my grandfather hired a 21-year-old Italian young man by the name of Joseph Coronella and changed his name to Joe Cornell. And Joe Cornell was their dance instructor. He was the Patrick Swayze of Greenbush Inn. And when I was 3 years old, and we used to spend our summers up there, obviously, when I was 3 years old, he taught me a little dance called the Ball and the Jack. First you put your 2 knees, I'm not going to sing the song. And in 1954, my grandfather had a heart attack and they sold Greenbush Inn, and Joe Cornell came to Northwest Detroit and opened up his first dance studio on Wyoming in the Northwest area of Detroit. And I started taking dance lessons, ballroom lessons, and I loved to dance. my first partner was someone who was probably one of my first friends that I can remember, that I'm still friends with to this day, and her name is Marcy Schulman. And Marcy Schulman and I danced in competitions, and I loved ballroom dancing. And I never stopped dancing. And even at almost 75, I'm still dancing. And so I've been in recitals with my daughter Nicole and my daughter Joanna, and danced 3-generation dances at Miss Barbara's Dance Studio in Julie Adler with my mother and myself and my daughters. And my biggest highlight was this last June, when my granddaughter Bella graduated from high school a year ago June. I danced with Bella in a grandfather-granddaughter dance, and that was excellent. But I'm still dancing, and I hope I keep on dancing.
Wow. And have you had other involvement with theater or music?
Yes. Okay. I love these stories. I hope I don't bore anybody. 1989, my daughter Joanna was 8 years old, and she came home from school with a flyer that Bloomfield Hills Recreation Department was starting a local community theater group called the Bloomfield Players. And Joanna loved to sing and dance, a Miller tradition, and my wife Carol took her to the audition. And Carol came home and said there were a lot of kids, a lot of women, and very few men. There was actually there was one guy, one dad there, who I went to dental school with. His name is Henry Hirsch, and I knew him. And Carol said, why don't you go tomorrow and audition? It'd be fun to be in the show with Joanna. So I went the next day and auditioned, and I have a decent voice, and I can move in time with the music. And I auditioned for no special part, but just audition. And they asked me back for 2 more callbacks, and they offered me the role in The Music Man in my very first show of Professor Harold Hill, the lead. Well, I loved it. It was not easy because our rehearsals were in the evening, and I'm a dentist. And I'd work on patients all day. I'd come home, I'd have a 30-minute dinner and run to the school and rehearse until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. But I got hooked. I fell in love. This was my third calling. My first is being a husband and a dad, second being a dentist, and third being a song and dance man in community theater. And from 1989 till 2000, 2 years before COVID, so like 2017, I was in about 30 productions. Wow. Only musicals, fun roles. Look at me. I was the lion in The Wizard of Oz once. I was Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls. I was in Bye Bye Birdie. I was in, I shaved my head in 2011, if you can believe. I was Daddy Warbucks in Annie, and I was in The Addams Family and Hairspray and whatever. Do
you remember any of the music from your first role?
I sure do.
Sing me a bar.
76 trombones led the big parade with 110 cornets right behind.
Thank you.
It's enough.
Love it. Just as much passion now as you probably had then.
A little less gray.
Simple question.
Yes.
Did you grow up with any pets?
A poodle.
His?
Bo Jangles O. Millhurst. The mill part, his name was Bo Jangles O. Millhurst. And that was our only pet. Never had pets after that.
Did you have a nice relationship with the pet? Or you just weren't a dog person or a pet person?
No.
Oh, wait, we'll move on from there.
But it was okay. It was fine.
So this was something my father knew every car he ever owned
Okay.
or had. So
Okay.
do you remember your first car?
I sure do.
And what was that?
1964 yellow Oldsmobile Cutlass convertible.
And I bet you know exactly how much it cost.
Maybe about $2,000, maybe something.
Something
Yeah,
like that?
that sort of rings a bell.
And what year did you buy that?
I didn't buy it. My father. 1964, when I was 16.
So when you were 16 years old, was that the time when you could legally drive, or was it
Yes.
sooner?
No, 16. You could get your permit when you were 15,
Okay.
and but you had to drive with a parent or something.
And what was the drinking age when you were in the early 60s?
The drinking age in the early 60s was 21. Eventually it went back to 18, but it was 21 at that time.
Okay.
My father didn't grow up with any toys. Okay, he always worked. And he bought a Corvette. And he had insurance on the car, but wouldn't let me drive it. And I wasn't insured to drive it. When my parents would go out on Saturday nights, and we had the Corvette for a very short time, which you'll understand why in a minute. When my parents would go out, I would ask them, so where are you going and who are you going with, what time are you coming home? And they were very naive. They just answered all those questions. And as soon as they left the driveway, I got in the Corvette, and I was 16, but I got in the Corvette and I was showing off. I mean, I'm driving a Corvette. Well, one day somebody did say to my father, boy, Harry, that was so nice that you changed your mind and got insurance so Larry could drive the car. The next day, my father sold the car. The next day, my father sold the car. So that was my car experience of having a sports car.
Did you ever buy a car that was like a lemon, that was just not good and you needed to get out of the...
No, I never did, but my father bought a Lincoln Continental where the back doors opened the other way. So the front doors open this way, the back doors open like this. And I remember when I was, so my birthday's in December, I remember that winter when I was driving their car, I was allowed to drive that. In those days, everybody hitchhiked. I mean, you know, like not everybody drove. They had cars, and you would see somebody you knew and you'd pick them up. And I remember that it was a cold day and there was a lot of snow and ice that had been pushed to the side. And this friend of mine got in, and the doors were really heavy. And I thought he had closed the door. And he didn't close the door. And I start pulling forward. And the door hits a big block of snow and ice. And the door literally, the hinge, the door fell off. My friends and I got out of the car, picked up the door, put it in the back seat. And that was another interesting experience. So that's about the closest. That's not a lemon, but I created that lemon by having that done. But I don't remember ever having a car that I bought that was a lemon.
How was your father's reaction to the news?
Is not happy pretty? No, it was way more than not happy. I'd rather not use some of the words that I think I could remember what he probably said at that time, but he got over it. I know that it was hard for me to tell him through the laughter about the door being in the back seat. But
do you recall having a first girlfriend?
Yes.
And who was?
Terry Burke. I took her to my senior prom. We broke up after I graduated high school. I mean, it wasn't a serious thing. It was my first girlfriend. And actually, I didn't see her until her 50th high school reunion. And I knew that she was going to be there. And I said to my wife, Carol, I'm gonna crash the reunion about 10:30 at night. And it was a Wabi Country Club, so it was near where I lived. I went there, and she was still cute, and we hugged, a little kiss on the cheek, and I had one dance with her, and then I went back home, but it was just fun seeing her. That was my date.
So you weren't the same grade?
No, I was 2 years older.
And you went to the same school?
Oak Park.
So I assume going off to college probably caused a natural end to that relationship?
Yes, it did.
Okay. For Carol's sake, we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So in 1961, November, you were 12 years old. November 22nd, 1963. What happened on that date?
John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
And do you remember where you were?
Yes, I was in school, and I remember that it was a Friday. And all I remember, don't forget, there was no social media. There, was all different world. But I remember the principal or assistant principal came over the PA system and told us all to go home. Some of us walked home. Some of us, they had the buses there, or if we had our own car, if we were old enough. Then all we did the whole weekend, for the first time in our lives, is watch a horrible tragedy on TV. And then that Monday, I believe, was the funeral, and there were no schools.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember if that had an impact on you? Was that like the first real major world event in your life that you...
In my life, because I was born after the Holocaust and or after World War II. And it was, wow, how this could happen. And, I was still young at the time, but I was in 10th grade, but it was something that none of us will forget, especially during the procession when little John Kennedy Jr. Saluted as his father's casket was gone by in the horse-drawn.
I wasn't alive for that, but I was for what happened on September 11th, 2001.
Of course.
What do you remember about that morning?
I was in my office, and I think I was getting ready for my very first patient, and I did have a TV. I had a TV in the waiting room. And our world stopped. The world just stopped. And we couldn't, I couldn't work on anybody. The patients didn't want to, they came in, we just sat there and we watched TV. It was an incredibly emotional, how could, other than Pearl Harbor, our country was attacked and people were killed. And it was just incredibly devastating period of time for all of us as Americans. And for me, it was very emotional. On a second, my mother was extremely ill. And that evening, I had to put her into Huron Valley Hospital. She had metastatic breast cancer, and she was a 25-year survivor, but it had really metastasized all over by then. And on September 22nd, 11 days later, my son Jared was getting married in Cleveland. And so this whole thing with 9/11 and my mother being in the hospital, Jared getting married, people not being able to come to the wedding who had to fly there because everybody was afraid to get on an airplane and many airports were still closed. And my mother died a few days after my son's wedding. And so this whole thing, like 9/11, 2001, with 9/11, October 2nd, my mother died. September 22nd was my son's wedding. So this whole, sadness, my son getting married, and then more sadness, but that's a circle of life.
and I didn't ask yet, and I was going to ask about when your mom died. You just said, what about your father? When did he pass away?
My father passed away, I'm taking a sip of water. My father passed away August 22nd, 2000. My mother 13 months later. My father was diagnosed when he was 70 with Alzheimer's, and he lived 14 years. Sweetest man. Unlike some people, he was just always happy. Even when he didn't know who I was, when he didn't know who my mother was, he was just a sweetheart. A couple quick interesting stories about my father that you may want to keep in or not. My father, toward maybe the last 3-4 years of his life, became a little sexual. I don't know if we can put that in or not. So, for example, I would take my father to the Coney on 14 and Orchard, and waitress would come by, and he would say, "Honey, come sit on my lap." He would pinch her. She would turn around. I would say, "It wasn't me." And she said, "Good, because if it was you, I'd slap you across the face." But he's a nice little old man, so it's okay. No, he really was character. He never. I remember one day my mother called me and said, "A dad fell. He didn't hurt himself, but he fell. But she couldn't pick him up. I mean, he was like solid as a rock and couldn't." And I went over there and I tried to pick him up, and I fell. And the two of us were on the floor, and we were laughing. He would look at me and say, "You're really a nice man." I would say, "Dad, it's Larry, your son." "Oh, yeah, Larry." And then a minute later, he wouldn't know who I was. But he was just the sweetest and nicest man. And my mother devoted his 14 years taking care of him. It was before there were any daycare places for the elderly and things like that. And she took care of him, and she was incredible. And then shortly after he died, her metastatic breast cancer just started to spread and spread and spread. So 13 months apart.
Did you have any family who were Holocaust survivors or family who perished in the Holocaust?
I never knew any of my great-grandparents. My maternal grandparents, or my maternal grandfather, my grandpa Harry Dermer, his family all perished in the Holocaust. I never knew any of them. I assume that many of the Miller and Dermer family that didn't come to the United States perished in the Holocaust. But most of my, like my aunts, uncles, great aunts and uncles, all came to the United States. Some actually in the late 1800s, and the rest in the early 1900s.
Have you had any family who took made Aliyah to Israel?
Yes. My first cousin, Lenore Solomon, whose mother was my father's sister, 88 years old. Her daughter, Susie, and her son-in-law, Eddie Kresh, lived in North Oak Park, modern Orthodox Jews. And many years ago, a number of years ago, probably 15, 20, they bought a condo in Herzliya, north of Haifa, and they would go 3-4 times a year to Israel. And they said, even at that time, that they were going to eventually make Aliyah. Their 3 older children made Aliyah in the last 2 or 3 years, and they were not going to make Aliyah until my cousin Lenore, who's 88, would pass away. Then they would make Aliyah. But they decided last September, a year ago September 2022, that even though my cousin was 88 in a wheelchair, had some health issues and memory issues, that they were taking her to Israel for good. And they've made Aliyah. And their older son, Max, is a reservist in the IDF, and he is on the front lines now. And I've been in contact with them, especially since October 7th.
I want to ask you how many times you visited Israel.
Twice.
What years did you go?
You're going to like this story. 1970. I graduated from Wayne. Again, the first one in my family, the first male to go to college. My parents made me a little graduation party at our house in Oak Park with relatives and friends. And everybody asked, what does Larry want for a present? And I said, I want money. There was a book called Europe on $5 a day. And three of my friends and I actually went to Europe on $5 a day. We stayed in pensions, which was like a step above a hostel because it had no curfew. But there would be 5, 6 people in a room, the bathroom down the hall, whatever. And we bought a Eurail pass and traveled around Europe. With no intentions of going to Israel, didn't even think about Israel. But now I'm in Rome with my buddies, and we're in a pension, and there's 2 young guys, same age as us, from New Jersey, who were in the same room with us in the pension. And we became friendly with them, and they told me that when we were going to leave Rome, my guys, and go to Vienna from there by train, that they were going to Israel. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'll never have an opportunity to go to Israel. Again, there was no social media, but I called my parents from a payphone. They accepted the call. And I said, I need you to wire me $79 to the American Express office. Why? Well, round-trip airfare from Rome to Tel Aviv was $79. And I said goodbye to my lifelong friends and went to Israel with 2 guys that I knew for 2 or 3 days. In those days, you would go to American Express offices and they had little cubicles where you could keep notes and different things about, like your friends and their itineraries. And they knew that 2 girls that they were friendly with from high school were also traveling throughout Europe and Israel. And I tagged along with them. And one of the girls was really adorable and cute. And we started talking, and she said, I know one girl from the Detroit area. Her name is Judy Winstock. And I said, you've got to be kidding. She lived on Burwood, the street that I told you that I grew up on. She and I went to elementary school, McDowell and Schultz together. Now, here you go. I don't know how many miles, 10,000, 8,000 miles, whatever it is, 6,000. I go to Israel and I meet this girl. And to make a long story short, we're married 52 years. That's where I met Carol. I met Carol from New Jersey, a girl from Newark, New Jersey. I met her just by happenstance at a sidewalk cafe on Dizengoff with her girlfriend and my 2 New Jersey friends. Yeah. And then in 1988, on the 40th anniversary of the State of Israel, I went on a mission with Rabbi Harold and Susan Loss from Temple Israel with a group of friends. It was a great trip because it was the last trip that Temple Israel took with only 1 bus. So there was a small group of people, about 40 people, and just Harold and Susan Loss. And we arrived in Tel Aviv the evening of the 40th anniversary of the State of Israel, and went from the airport to the town square in Tel Aviv, where the Israel Philharmonic and Zubin Mehta were playing in a concert. And after we got there, they played Hatikva. And we all got off the bus and sang Hatikva, and cried. So those were I haven't been back since. So it's 35 years.
So as we sit here today, you mentioned October 7th. When I originally prepared to interview you, I had on here JFK, and I had on here 9/11. What I didn't have on here was what happened on October 7th. And we're in the middle right now of something that feels like a precipice in history. That just seems like every day things are unfolding in new and kind of ugly ways with rallies, anti-Israel rallies, and people protesting, Jewish business owners, all stemming from a terrorist organization attacking Israel, murdering people who have been in the Holocaust, babies, families, on a Jewish holiday, Shmini Atzeret. And you're a Jewish man with Jewish roots. You've been to Israel twice. You met your wife in Israel. How has what has gone on now for 22 days been impacting you personally?
Absolutely with me 24/7, like it is with all of us. Nonstop watching CNN, reading the New York Post, the Jerusalem Post, our Detroit Jewish News. There really are no words. It's the most devastating, the most horrific thing that has happened to our people. That the Hamas terrorists, they hate us. They hate the Jews. They want to do everything they can to kill every Jew in Israel. They do not want there to be a state of Israel. And now, wherever, on college campuses in the United States, the other day, right on Orchard Lake Road, north of 14 Mile, there was a pro-Palestinian rally. It's incomprehensible what is happening right now. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live and will live, and I'm behind the IDF 100% and the state of Israel, and I hope and pray that this war ends. It's very sad that innocent people, Israelis and Palestinians, there are Palestinians that are not bad people. They just want to live in peace too. And sadly, innocent people are going to die and have died. I just hope for a victory and peace, and
does something like this shake your faith in God? And if there was a good, just God, why do things like this happen in the world? Are there silver linings that you perhaps see from things like this, or try to create just so that you can get through this?
Silver linings, Brad, no. I don't see silver linings, but when you think about the Holocaust, 6 million Jews, and you think about what it's been like for the people who I admire so much who live in Israel, who have lived there, especially since 1948. We just can't give up. We say never more, and it has to be never again. It has to be never more. And there's always going to be hate in the world, unfortunately, and there's always going to be people that, for whatever reason, hate the Jews, hate us. And all we want to do is live in peace. I don't see a silver lining, but I hope I just want to see an end to this.
So there are a couple other significant times in history that you lived through, and I'm just curious what your experience was like, what your thoughts were like during the Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War, I was an undergrad at Wayne, and then also during the time that I was in dental school in Ann Arbor. knew a couple people that were in the Vietnam War, including a cousin of mine, who thank God was safe. I did have a fraternity brother of mine whose younger brother enlisted right after high school, and he died that year in Vietnam. I also knew a few people that fled to Canada, but you know, we were young, 18, 19, 20 years old. We were in college. It was so far away. It was so far away. You know, again, there was no social media before, you know what we have now. And it was just, you know, what we saw on TV with all the protests, et cetera, et cetera. And, it was a time of psychedelic drugs, but for us in our community here, I was in a fraternity at Wayne, and we just, for whatever reason, our lives just went on.
Were you at risk of
normal
being
lives.
drafted?
No, I had a very high number, but also my glasses were about that thick in those days, and I've since had some cataract surgery, but my vision was so bad that I couldn't have gone in. So I didn't have a risk. And I also think that if you were in pre-med or pre-dent, or if you went into dental school or medical school, I think you were okay.
When you were young enough to know that people that were older worked for a living, did you have any designs on being anything other than a dentist? Did you want to be like some kids want to be a fireman or a policeman?
No, I always wanted to be a doctor. For whatever, I don't know why, I wanted to be a doctor. And when I actually started Wayne, I was in pre-med. I had a first cousin through marriage who was a dentist. And I used to go to his office, and it dawned on me that, okay, he's not called a medical doctor, but he's a dental doctor. The only doctor that takes care of the oral cavity teeth and smiles and everything else. And what I loved about it when I would talk to him is, well, first of all, you went to dental school for 4 years and then you became a dentist. You didn't, in those days, you had to be an intern if you went to medical school and do a residency and, you know, everything else. And you'd be on call at night and everything. And I said, boy, well, you know, I think I'm going to change. I'm going to go into pre-dent. And he promised me when I graduated that I could go in to work with him, which I did for 1 year. But it was the same courses at Wayne and pre-med, pre-dent, you know, like the science courses and all that. And I made a good decision because even 49 years later, absolutely loved being a dentist. So I made the right decision.
So what year did you become licensed?
I got my license in July of 1974, 49 years ago, and I went to work that first year with my cousin, Elroy Wolf. I decided after a year that I didn't want to work for anybody, even though he was my cousin through marriage. He was tougher than some of my professors at dental school, and I opened my own office in Livonia, June 1st, 1975. And I was in that office for 45 years.
So my math serves me correctly till 2019.
That's correct.
So you retired just before another major
Just before COVID.
happening.
Just before COVID.
So you really weren't as impacted from a career perspective by COVID as you may have been had you still been in practice.
Right, exactly. After 45 years in practice, I decided that it was time for me to retire, or so I thought. It's a tough profession. I loved it, and I loved my patients. I had the perfect kind of practice that I wanted, a family practice. I had not only third, but even fourth generation patients. I was invited to weddings, funerals. I just want to let you know my mother died this morning, and I would go. I mean, I had the best relationship with my patients. What's fun about dentistry that people have to understand is that you really develop relationships. It's not like going to, a specialist where you may see them once and never again. I would see people every 6 months. And I loved being a dentist. I was tired of being a businessman and a dentist. I just wanted to be a dentist. So COVID did impact me because shortly after I sold my practice, I became an adjunct clinical professor at University of Michigan, which I was until May of this year. So it was COVID crazy at the dental school. I mean, what we had to wear, we looked like, like Martians, with our masks and the special N95 masks and, with all the garb and everything like that. So it did impact me, but in a different way as a clinical professor teaching the students.
So let's turn to a subject that I'm sure you're going to enjoy speaking about, and that is your wife and your children, and your children's children. Let's go through the real simple parts of it first. Just let us know your names of your children, when they were born, and start there.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start off first with the day that I married Carol. August 8th, 1971, so we're married 52 years. April 14th, 1973, the same year that you were born, Nicole was born. Nicole Elise Miller, who is now 50. She is married to Bubba Erden for the last 7 years. Nicole has 2 children, Max, who is 21, senior at University of Michigan, and Isabella, but we only call her Bella, who is a sophomore at the University of Michigan. Jared Scott Miller, my only son, born June 7th, 1976, married to Stephanie. They live in Cleveland. I have to go back to Nicole for a minute. Nicole, for the last 12 years, has been the executive director of Michigan ORT, of which I am very, very proud of Nicole and all the incredible work she does for ORT. Jared lives in Cleveland. He and Stephanie have been married for 22 years, and Jared works for his father-in-law. He's a non-practicing attorney who works for his father-in-law in wealth management, and Ben, his oldest son, is 19, who is a sophomore at Indiana. Nate is 17. He's a junior at the University High School in the Cleveland suburbs. And Jay is 13 and goes to the Mandel Jewish Day School in Cleveland. Then there's Joanna. Joanna was born October 16th, 1981. She's married to Michael Steinberg. They live in Scarsdale, New York. A little quick interesting story. They met the second day of school as freshmen at Michigan at the Diag. Mike's from New York, Joanna's from Detroit, and they dated all 4 years, and they now have Emma, who is 14, freshman at Scarsdale High School. We call her Charlie, but her name is Charlotte. She's in 6th grade at Scarsdale Middle School, and Dylan, who is in 3rd grade at Quaker Ridge Elementary School in Scarsdale, New York. So 3 children. I really say 6 children because I don't have in-law children. They're all my children, and 8 grandchildren. I am Carol and I are very, very blessed.
Before we got started today, you picked up a call from Max. You're meeting him for dinner tonight. I would imagine that you do a very good job of staying as best in touch with your kids locally and grandkids that are out of state as you can. You seem like the type that is just constantly involved in their lives. I would imagine that's the case.
Well, that is the case. It's funny that you're saying that because I could call Max 10 times, and on the 11th time, he'll either answer the phone or he'll send me a text. He's busy at school. All the kids are. But I stay as close with them as I can. I'm very lucky that Max and Bella are in Ann Arbor, so we do see them fairly often. We go to Cleveland a couple times a year. We go to New York a couple times a year. But I do have to say, I love FaceTime, because if it wasn't for FaceTime, a call is one thing, but when I can see the kids and, you feel like you're really in the same room with them. And so we do try to keep in touch with them as often as we can. And, like sometimes I might be a little annoying because they tell me I ask too many questions. I want to know, so what'd you do today and how's school and this and that. Papa, everything's okay. They call me Papa. And, I wish my kids all lived here. It would be a lot easier, but I do keep in touch with them a lot, and I know all about their activities and everything they do. And the older ones tell me what they want to tell me, which is okay.
So try to put into words what your children and your grandchildren mean to you.
Everything. There's a little joke that a lot of us say at our age: if we could have skipped children and just gone to grandchildren, we would have done that. There's just something incredible about being a grandpa, about being a papa. I know that I feel like I've really built a legacy. I was very close with my grandparents. I was incredibly close with my parents. And I visit them a lot. I go to the cemetery a lot. It makes me feel good, and I talk to them all the time. And I talk to them about the legacy. I talk to them about my children and my grandchildren. And they know how, my grandchildren know how important they are to me. Even the fact that my grandson Max, who's coming in from Ann Arbor to go to a movie this afternoon, could have gone right back up to Ann Arbor. He said, what are you and Mimi doing? Do you have dinner plans? If I did have dinner plans, I would have canceled them. But we didn't have dinner plans, and we were going to have dinner with him. So it's things like that I can't get enough of them, and I love them. And I tell my friends, after they had their first grandchild, it's the greatest club to be in, the grandparent club.
It's wonderful. So you told the story earlier of how you met Carol. You told us when you got married. How did you propose to Carol?
Well, it's a story that Carol says enough already. I can't stand you telling everybody this story. So after I came back to the United States and started dental school, and Carol went back to New Jersey and I'm an elementary school teacher. I started dental school. Again, there were no cell phones or any of that. So about a month after I was in dental school, my mother happened to bump into this Judy Winstock, the girl that we knew in common, a former neighbor of mine. And I never even told my parents that I had met Carol. It was just, I saw her for a couple days, and that was it. And this friend said to my mother, like Peggy, when Larry was in Israel, he met a friend of mine that I knew in college, and you should have him write her a letter. So my mother calls me, and I decide to even forget about writing her a letter, but calling her. I called her, and I said, I'd like to come visit you next month. She said, okay. Flew to Newark Airport, stayed with her family for a couple days, had a nice time. She'll tell people she really didn't care for me that much, but I liked her. She's very pretty and nice, very smart. And then I said, so now it's your turn. You come to Michigan. So she came in November, and I was up in Ann Arbor. My sister Susie was a freshman at Eastern, and she wouldn't stay with me in my apartment. She stayed with my sister in her dorm room. And we had a nice weekend. And I said, look, next month is December. I have 2 weeks off from dental school. I knew that she had 2 weeks off from teaching. I said, let's meet in Florida. My parents were renting an apartment in Hallandale, Florida. She stayed in a hotel 2 doors away. We spent 2 weeks together. And on New Year's, I asked her to marry me. We had been together for less than 30 days. And she said yes. Then she went back home. Her father died when she was very young. Her father died when she was only 4 years old, when he was 35, of leukemia. She was very close with her grandparents. And her grandmother said, "Where's your ring?" Her grandmother was a typical, old-fashioned Jewish grandmother. "Well, I don't have a ring yet." "Well, when you have a ring, then I'll know that you're engaged." So she tells me that. So the next month in January, my parents and I flew out to New Jersey. I didn't have any money. My mother actually gave me the stone from her engagement ring, which I had set. I gave it to Carol. And then, again, there's no social media, there's no FaceTime, there's none of that. Most people met girls from the same area town, and we were together once a month until August 8th. And I was very active at Temple Israel. Rabbi Simon did something that very few rabbis did in 1971, and my parents flew him out to perform our ceremony. Destination weddings today are very normal. This was really not a destination wedding because it's where Carol lived in New Jersey, but she didn't have any relationship with a rabbi, and I was very close to Rabbi Simon, and he came and officiated at the wedding. And she does tell this one story that she would probably be very upset if I told you, but I'm going to say it. As she was walking down the aisle, she says, "What am I doing? I don't even know this guy." I mean, think about it. We were together for less than 30 days, and we were getting married. And not only that, but I was taking her away from her mother and her brother. I was taking her from New Jersey to Ann Arbor, where she didn't really know anybody. She knew a few of my friends, and I was busy in school all day long, and she was an elementary school teacher and subbed for that first year. So it was really, but here we are, still married after 52 years.
Beautiful story. What would you say Carol would say if she were sitting here is her favorite things about being married to you?
I'm a great family man. I'm still so crazy about her. I'm very lucky to have her as my wife. I can be moody. I can be, I would come home from work and be tired and complain about maybe my day at the office and whatever, and it didn't make a difference. She always been there for me. I personally love everything about her. We'll talk at the end, maybe you'll ask me certain things about me, and I think she would say that it's been a very interesting ride.
And then the opposite question, what are your favorite things about Carol?
She knows how to tone me down. I'm a double A. Am I a triple A or a double A personality, Brad? I'm a type A personality. She's very classy. She's very quiet. She's, opposites do attract. She'll say, "Okay, Larry, that's enough." It took me a long time, but I do listen to her now, most of the time. She's as beautiful today as she was when I met her in 1970, 53 years ago. Such a classy lady. When I go somewhere, I'm always happy that she's by my side, and she's stuck with me through some maybe trying times, but most of them have been amazing times. Raising three, she's the most amazing mother. the most amazing grandmother. And there isn't one person that I've ever met that has said anything negative. Everybody, I know this sounds crazy, everybody loves Raymond, everybody loves Carol. Carol is just the nicest, sweetest, she has a heart of gold. She had a tough life growing up. She was only 4.5 years old when her father died. And it was tough growing up. She should tell me this one story that always made me very, very sad. And this is back in the early 50s. Things were different. Things wouldn't be like this today. The first day of school in first grade, the teacher would go around the room and say, "And what does your daddy do? What does your daddy do?" And she would say, "I don't have a daddy." And that one day, that really marked her for life. And she loved my parents. I think it was Beshert that I went to Israel and I met the love of my life.
It's no doubt Beshert. It's such an amazing story. We've touched upon a lot of family members, but just, I think you said you had aunts and uncles on each side of the
Yes.
family. Can you remember all their names?
Oh, are you kidding?
Please.
Okay. Uncle Al, my father's oldest brother. Uncle Bill, the next brother, and his wife, Aunt Betty. Loved Uncle Bill and Aunt Betty. Joe, Uncle Joe and Aunt Goldie. Joe was my father's brother, but his best friend. And they were together. That's how he got in the roofing business. And Joe and my father did everything together. Like I said, they grew up, they worked for their father in the deli business. They never had any toys, but when they were adults, they both had boats. And we would go on the boats together. Joe and Goldie were great. And then there was one sister, Rebecca, Aunt Becky, and it's her daughter, Lenore, who's 88, who is in Israel, made Aliyah. On my mother's side, my mother had an older brother, Mort, Uncle Morty and Aunt Sadie Dermer, very close with them. My mother had one sister, Ruth, Aunt Ruth and Uncle Al Gursky, very close with them. And all my first cousins growing up together. My parents were both the youngest in their families, so unfortunately most of my first cousins are no longer here.
What about your grandparents? What were their names?
Max and Molly Miller from a little town in Russia called Brest-Litovsk. Brest-Litovsk. They were both from the same town, and they got married in 1907 in Brest-Litovsk. Their first son was born a year later in 1908, Al. Bill was born in 1910 there. Joe was born in 1911 there. They emigrated to the United States in 1913. Rebecca was born in Newark, New Jersey, and then they came to Detroit, and my father was born in Detroit in 1916, so he was the only sibling born in Detroit. My mother's parents, Harry and Rose Dermer, they were married in, can you believe all these years I know? They were married in 1909 in New York. My grandma Rosie came here and she was born in 1890 in Odessa, Russia, and she came here when she was 3 years old with her mother and father and her older siblings and her one younger sister. And my grandfather, Harry Dermer, came here by himself in 1903 when he was 20 years old, was born in Austria, came on a ship that left from Hamburg, Germany, and came to New York in 1903. And they came to Detroit around 1920, and my mother was the only one of the three siblings that was born in Detroit.
Were any of your great-grandparents alive when you were born?
No. I was named after Zlata, who died in 1944, 4 years before. And that's why my Hebrew name is Zalman, her name was Zlata. But no, all my great-grandparents died before I was born.
And like your grandchildren have a special relationship with you, did you have special relationships with your grandparents?
Oh, I sure did. As I think I said earlier, every Friday night was visiting the Dermer grandparents. No, pardon me, the Miller grandparents in Detroit. And on Sunday afternoon was going to the Dexter Davison area to visit the Dermer grandparents. And yes, great times and relationships with both sides of the family. And the interesting thing is both sides of the family were even close, which doesn't always happen. So the Millers and the Dermers were also friends besides, being on different sides of the family.
Just to make sure we have it straight, what elementary school did you start at?
I went to McDowell Elementary School from kindergarten to 5th grade. Then I went to Schultz for the 5th and 6th grade, and then we moved to Oak Park. I went to Clinton Junior High School, and then graduated Oak Park High School in 1966.
I would assume, given your being a doctor, you were a decent student in school?
I was a decent student in school. I was maybe a little nerdy. I'm not even embarrassed to say that. I loved school. Never got in trouble. I remember I was in a club called the Medical Careers Club for guys that, and there was mostly guys that were interested in going in the health profession. No, nobody ever made a call saying that Larry did this or Larry did that, so the only thing that I do, once I was a senior in high school, and it was the spring, and most of us were accepted to college, I did do something that I thought was pretty funny. Like I said, I always wore glasses, but I knew how to take my lens and pop it out, so in the spring, when it was a nice day, had a whole thing with my friends, I would pop off. I'd say, oh my God, my glasses just broke, I can't see. And a certain friend would raise his hand and say, oh, I have my car today, I'm happy to take Larry to the eye doctor. And then in the parking lot, I'd put the lens back in, and we'd go to Kensington. So that was about the worst thing I ever did, but I never got caught. So you can see I was sort of a nerdy kind of guy.
Pretty creative, too. Who was your best friend when you grew up?
Arthur Fine. Did everything with Art.
CPA? Art Fine?
CPA?
Yes.
Oh, you're kidding.
I know Art Fine.
Really?
Sure.
Art Fine was my best friend. We did everything together. I stood up at his wedding. He stood up at our wedding. I became his dentist. He did not become my accountant, but I became his dentist. And though we're not that close anymore, we do see each other. In fact, we see each other at Temple Israel at services a lot.
Speaking of Temple, what was the date of your bar mitzvah?
November 18th, 1961.
And you were bar mitzvah at Temple Israel?
On Manderson.
Who was the rabbi?
Fromm and Syme. We had no cantor at that time. There was a cantor who had died the year before in 1960. Orbach didn't start for a couple years later. But my grandparents were fairly religious. They weren't thrilled that we were members of Temple Israel anyways, but in those days, without a cantor, we didn't even chant the blessings. We spoke them. Baruch et, and my mother went to Rabbi Syme and said, look, it would make my father and father-in-law really happy if Larry could chant the blessings. And Rabbi Syme grew up in an Orthodox home. He's from Canada. And I was the first Temple Israel bar mitzvah, there were no bat mitzvahs in those days, bar mitzvah celebrant to ever chant the blessings.
Wow.
And the next year Orbach came, and then everybody started chanting the blessings.
All right, we're going to go from kind of deeper to a little bit more on the surface here. So I'm going to ask you some questions about some of your favorites. Do you have a couple of favorite movies that you could share?
Shawshank Redemption, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Singing in the Rain, An American in Paris, Grease, Dirty Dancing, any movie that Billy Crystal was ever in, any movie that Gene Kelly was ever in, Some Like It Hot, any movie that that Jimmy Stewart was in for sure. Okay.
I just saw a picture of Jimmy Stewart as a young man. Boy, was he handsome.
Yeah, great actor.
Wow.
Oh, Spencer Tracy too. Boys Town. Love the movie Boys Town. If you've never seen it, watch Boys Town.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
I'm glad she's not here. Everything. What's my favorite food? I love a good steak. I love a good pizza. It's not so easy to find a good pizza, though. My favorite pizza is Joe's Pizza in Ann Arbor. Thin crust, New York style. That's my kind of pizza. Good Italian food. Favorite Italian restaurant is in Grosse Pointe, a little place called Bucci, B-U-C-C-I. Was there last night. Great restaurant. Chinese, Manjin Lao. I don't know if I should mention the name of the restaurants or not, but too bad I'm promoting them, I guess.
In 100 years, when somebody watches this, maybe they'll have a chance to still go there.
Exactly. Good delis. Good deli food. Good deli food.
When you sit down for a nice meal and they say, what would you like to drink? What's your favorite?
Vodka.
What about places?
Straight. On the rocks.
What about places you've traveled? What are some of your favorites?
Israel, of course. For our 25th anniversary, we went on a Mediterranean cruise. We went to Paris for a few days and then flew from Paris to Marseille. And then we got on a boat and went to Cannes, Monte Carlo, went up the coast of Italy. It was just amazing. Been on a number of Caribbean cruises. Took our kids to Mexico, Acapulco, Puerto Vallarta, Cancun, Cayman Islands. Went on lots and lots of cruises, and we would always go over Christmas with the same families that we're still extremely close with. And been to California a number of times, Arizona a number of times. And now most of our places that we travel to are Cleveland and New York to visit our kids and grandchildren.
Are you a sports fan?
I'm a sports fan, mostly college. I love Michigan football, number one. This was the first year that I've really taken some time to watch the Lions. Like growing up, I think all of us as kids, would go to Tiger Stadium and go to baseball games. And when my kids were young, we used to go to a lot of Pistons games. But truthfully, it's mostly college football. Oh, and I'm a fan also of golf, of course, and tennis.
Were you ever at a professional sports event where something incredible happened that you remember?
No. Except I did go to the U.S. Open in New York, and that was just amazing being there watching some of the greats play.
Sounds awesome. in your lifetime, you must have met time and again some celebrities. Do you have any stories from any celebrity sightings or meetings that would be worth sharing?
Well, they really weren't celebrities, but in 2000, 23 years ago, there was a very, very, very short-lived reality program, one of the first ones, called Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire? And the first two people on this program, Rick Rockwell, who said he was a millionaire, proved not to be a millionaire, but whatever, and a pretty blonde named Darva Conger, were the two people on this program that they ended up getting married, and their honeymoon was going on a cruise. Carol and I were on the same cruise, small ship. We were on the same cruise, left from Barbados in the Caribbean, and we became close with them over that week period. Well, it turned out to be a whole bunch of nonsense, and she left the cruise before the cruise was over, and when they came back to the United States, the whole thing was on TV. Everybody was interviewing them, and the only picture at all of them on the cruise was a picture of me and Carol. And we ended up being in People magazine. We ended up being on the front page of most newspapers, the LA Times, the Free Press, the New York Times, whatever. What happened, so we came back, and the day after that, I was driving to my dental office, and on a local radio station, one of the disc jockeys was talking about how the two of them went on their honeymoon to Hawaii. And so I called the station and said, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. The two of them were on a cruise with me in the Caribbean, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we were on some local, even national TV news, and that was it was a little more than our 5 minutes of being a celebrity, but it was a real, if I can use the word, kibitz. So it really was a kibitz, was fun. The only other time we ever really, that I met anybody, was the, for some people, well-known Broadway star Sutton Foster, who's won a number of Tonys, and my children know how much I love Broadway, and they surprised me on my 70th birthday 5 years ago with 2 tickets to a charity event in New York on Broadway, and we were VIP guests, and we met Sutton Foster after the show, and we were invited to the after theater extravaganza, and it was very, very exciting. But that's really my claim to fame, except I do have a very famous cousin who I didn't know, and I did meet him once. Ron Dermer was the United States ambassador to Israel, and eventually became the Israeli ambassador to the United States when he made Aliyah. And I only met him once. His last name Dermer and my mother's maiden name Dermer. We did discover that we are related, and he's now Netanyahu, one of his right-hand men in Israel. So that's probably the most famous relative I have.
So you are setting out on a long car ride, and you go to put on some music because you want to listen to your favorite music. What's going on the radio?
Broadway, 60s. I have to just do one thing. Carol, would you come here for a minute? You're going to like this. Carol? So, Broadway, 60s. He just asked me when I'm in the car and I'm listening to music, what my favorite music to listen to is. What am I not allowed to have on when you're in the car with me?
50s.
Okay.
No, I mean, I just don't like 50s. I just don't. he plays the 60s. We have Sirius, a million station. Are you taping this?
Yeah.
No, then I'm stopping.
No, don't. No. It's too bad. He can edit anything. But when I get in the car, and if it is when I was in the car before and the 50s was on, the first thing you say is, you know I don't like the 50s, change it. And I do.
But when you drive my car, you put the 50s on.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you say?
I'm sitting next to
Right.
you, and I don't like.
Okay. So that's why I called her out. Okay.
Okay, so now I don't want to be part of this. That's all right. And they're really not dressed for the part.
Oh,
You look beautiful.
you could change. Clothes, I mean. Okay. Thanks.
So it's funny you mentioned.
You can do whatever you want with that, but that's the
It's
truth.
funny, maybe there'll be some bloopers. It's funny that you mentioned the 50s music because with Sirius Radio and the 50s station,
Yeah.
when I was in the car with my children, we only put it on because we got a kick out of the names of the songs.
Oh.
And we had a whole list
Oh, is that
we
funny?
would make of the ones that were the funniest titles, and we've lost the list since.
Oh,
but there were songs like Aldi La.
Aldi La.
Your chewing gum, or your chewing gum loose.
On the bedpost, well, does your chewing gum lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight?
That song.
Right?
We had
Right,
a whole
right.
list of songs, and we would read them out every once in a while and crack
Right.
up from the names of the 50s
Right.
music.
Yeah.
But you love all that music.
I grew up with that.
Yeah.
But not all the junk, like Frankie Avalon and Paul Anka, Buddy Holly. I'm a Buddy Holly fanatic. I think Buddy Holly was one of the greatest. And yeah, so
Do you identify with a political party?
yeah.
Do you care to share?
Well, I'm a Democrat.
And have you always been? Have you gone back and forth?
For the most part, I've always been. Don't ask me. I don't know what I'm going to do in the next, but
Is it something that's a passion of yours? Do
No.
you attend any political events? Have you attended? Did you go crazy over a candidate every now and again? Or is politics there but not such an important part of your life?
see, I want to say something, but I don't know if I should. And if you think it'll cause an issue, then you can do what you want.
Say it and we can always edit it out.
I hate Trump. I just,
Okay?
wait a minute, 3 words, and I just said it. So, now we'll move on.
This is your
Well, I just,
present. You can let your family know whatever you want to know.
I will say
Want
this
them to
much.
know.
I do think it's very sad that we don't have anybody young in their 40s and 50s. I mean, John Kennedy was 42. Obama was young. I feel bad that the world is the way it is, our country is the way it is, that there's nobody young coming up in the ranks of either the Democratic or Republican parties. It's tough having, 80-year-old people want to, run for presidents. I retired at 70. I'm working part-time now, but I'd like to see a younger president.
I assume you are a supporter of ORT.
Very much so.
Are there other charities that have been near and dear to you that you've supported over the years?
Yes, the Alzheimer's Association, mainly because of my father. Anything that has to do with breast cancer, the American Cancer Society, but anytime there's anything to do with, fighting cancer. I've had, like a lot of us, friends, young, who have died of cancer. One of my really close friends was Dr. Jeffrey Foreman, who was a very prominent doctor in the community. And it was because of Jeff that my mother really was a 25-year survivor. I've always supported, as well as I could, Jewish causes, especially now the FIDF and anything we can do to help our families, our brothers who are in Israel. And I've been a member of Temple Israel since 1956, and Temple Israel is my home.
Do you have any possession that's been either created during your life or was passed down to you from a family member that's like a prized possession that you look at and it just gives you incredible feeling or emotion?
Yeah, I have a Passover Haggadah that my grandfather had since the 1920s, not 2020s, 1920s, that I still have in my possession. I have my father's Masonic ring. My father was a Mason and a Shriner, and I have his Masonic ring, and I also have his Masonic hat. But when my parents died, my sisters and I each took something that was sentimental, of memorabilia, of something, yeah. And I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and I love looking at the pictures of my family, especially the ones who aren't here anymore.
So I'm going to ask you several more questions, but they're the tougher questions. And I think we've warmed you up enough now that
Tough questions?
you're ready to get there.
I'm ready for a nap. No, I'm just kidding. You can delete that.
If you were to impart any amount of wisdom, life's experience, sitting with your grandchildren now at an age where they're becoming more like adults, what types of things would you say to them that you feel would make a significant impact on their life from what experiences you've had in yours?
I hope that they would agree with what I would have to say about how important family is. I constantly talk about my years of growing up with my parents and my grandparents. I think my children know that family is the most important thing to me. Being kind. Just being a really good person. Being nice to people. Even if they're not always nice to you, find the good in people. Be involved in the community. For the last 36 plus years, I've been a Minyan Shiva leader at Temple Israel. And I'm asked often to go into people's homes. And I hope I bring them comfort. And it's something that I really love doing. I was asked by the rabbis to be involved in this many, many years ago, and I'm still doing it now. And I'm saying that I want my kids to know that because I think whatever they do, be involved in something that comes from your heart. Whether it be a Jewish organization, a non-Jewish organization, or to be in your community and local government or whatever. But this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I've been at some funerals where I'll be sitting next to a friend of mine, and I'll hear the rabbi, as part of his eulogy, say something incredibly nice about the person who passed away. And I would know that person who passed away well, and so would the people I'm sitting with. And when one of them would look at me and say, who's the rabbi talking about? I hope at my funeral, people will remember the goodness that I think I've had. And I hope my children will grow up, and many of them, well, my children are already grown up, but my grandchildren, I think between me and Carol, they have the best of both of us. I think we both are, Carol and I, are so proud of our family and what they've done. And I hope that they have learned so much from the two of us. And that was a difficult question, so thank you for really making me have to think.
Another difficult question, and the answer could be none. But do you have any regrets in your life that are meaningful regrets that you'd want to share?
Well, I may have some meaningful regrets, but I may not want to share them. No. I wish I didn't fly off the handle as much as I have. I wish I was sometimes kinder and sweeter to my wife. I'm really big for, I'm sorry. But then I say to myself, if I didn't do what I did, I wouldn't have to say, I'm sorry. That's about it. I loved my profession so much. I loved being a dentist, and I'm glad I'm still doing it now, even though it's part-time. I love being a dentist. I don't have any regrets at all with that. I'm so lucky that I have a great family. And I have a terrific group of friends. But I think if we didn't have flaws, we wouldn't be human. And I think the important thing is that instead of saying I'm sorry, I wish sometimes that I would stop before I open my mouth and not have to say I'm sorry. That's my biggest regret, I think.
So you're about to be 75 years old. You've told us an unbelievable amount of stories in your life. You've experienced a lot. You've been through a lot. In the next 5 years, what would you want to accomplish? What types of bucket list items would you want to check off, if you could, in the next 5 years of your life?
Well, the first one is that my youngest grandson, Dylan, is 9. And I want to be at his bar mitzvah. That's in 4 years. So that's number one. I'd love to see all my grandchildren graduate from college. I'd love to become a great-grandfather and Carol a great-grandmother. I would love that. I would love that. I hope Carol and I stay healthy. Thank God so far we both are. And we have a lot of friends who unfortunately are not so lucky in that respect. I hope I'm still able to do a little of the things I do that I love now. Like continue being a part-time dentist. I love it. I love still being able to work with my hands and to go into dental offices and be a contract dentist like I am. I hope in 5 years it'll be 40 plus years that I've been a minion and shiva leader. I hope I can still remember the lyrics to all the songs I love to sing on the radio, including 50 songs when Carol's not in the car with me. And yeah.
Open-ended question.
Yes.
And the last question. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that's been on your mind during this interview that you'd like to share, any stories, any thoughts. This is kind of open tish here, in the words of Rabbi Syme,
Yeah.
that you can share, because I have asked you pretty much all the questions that I thought to ask you and some others. But if you have anything on your mind that you'd want to share, feel free to share it now.
No, I really don't. I think you really have covered everything, but I do want to say something about the two of you. I want to thank you, Brad and Max, for coming to my home today and allowing me to tell the life story of Larry Miller.